With the release of Legendary Xander, we now have 37 Legendary Heroes, and with the addition of Legendary Alm's Remix and Refine, we now have 16 Refines and Remixes. I always found Legendary Heroes to be really interesting since they tend to be upgraded versions of major characters with cool new weapons and skills. I'm going to go over every Legendary Hero and give my thoughts on them. Not a really high analysis of them, but just how I feel about them. I'm going to go over things like their stats, weapons, base kits, fodder, non-base kit builds, refines, remixes, art, and anything else I could think of for the unit. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get right into it. Fioram is our first legendary hero, given to us in the beginning of Book 2. She is a Lance Infantry Water legendary who grants speed. She's got a pretty high resistance and the rest of her stats are pretty balanced. Her weapon, Lepter, originally only had distant counter built into it, which was not bad for a unit they gave to us for free. Her unique special Ice Mirror lets her reduce damage from ranged foes by 30% and then dish back the damage she reduced, which I always found to be really clunky to use. Like, it's hard to get her to only fight ranged units but not melee ones. She came with Attack Defense Bond 3, Shield Pulse 3, and Drive Attack 2, which at the time wasn't a bad kit as it synergized with her unique special. Her fodder, I feel, is pretty mediocre, though for a while Attack Defense Bond 3 was sort of rare, so there's that. She's also one of the few units with Shield Pulse 3, though I don't consider this a highly coveted skill. She, along with Ike, were the first to get a legendary remix, where she was given Attack Defense Unity and Ice Mirror 2, which increased the percentage of damage reduction to 40% and boosted the damage of her next counterattack by 40% of her res instead of the damage she reduced, which now makes it similar to Korn's Negating Fang special. Her Lepter weapon refine retains distant counter and now grants +4 to all stats and neutralizes her penalties. This actually was unsynergetic with the Unity skill she was given in her remix, so the devs later gave her Mirror Stance 3 for free. Because of this, she went from good fodder to godlike fodder, where you can give both Attack Defense Unity and Mirror Stance 3 all at once. So Fioram's changes were pretty nice, but they still only allow her to excel versus ranged foes, which far save units can do a lot better at. Still, the changes are very welcome. In terms of art, I always thought it was pretty good, but also on the average side. Maybe seeing her so often in Forging Bonds has made me sick of her art, but who knows. I rate her 3 stars. I don't think she's been that great of a unit in the past or present, but her newly bestowed skills really help carry her in the modern times as fantastic fodder. Next up is Gunthra, Fioram's older sister. She is a Green Tome Cavalry Wind legendary who grants res. She has pretty decent attack and speed but abysmal defense, quickly falling to any physical unit. Her Blizzard Tome increases her damage based on the penalties on her opponent, which was pretty good in an age when penalty neutralization was kind of rare. Her unique B skill, Chilling Seal, decreases the attack and speed of the opponent with the lowest defense, which helped increase her damage output from Blizzard. However, the rest of the kit was laughably bad. Fortress Res 3 decreases her attack just to increase her res, which wasn't really high to begin with, and Res Poi 3 does help with debuffing the enemy, but her res is not too high and she has to be in the cardinal direction of the enemy. Yeah, so her base kit was not great and her fodder was awful. When given proper skills, Gunthra was a decent green cav for a while, though power creep eventually took its toll on her. Her remix gave her attack res solo 4, which helps her damage output. Chilling Seal 2 decreases all stats by 7 on the enemy with the lowest defense and decreases attack and res on the foes within 2 spaces of the dunked on enemy, making the ability both offensive and supportive. Her Blizzard Refine got some sweet additions. Along with the original effect, it now inflicts -4 on speed and res, and also gains the Pledgian effect, which is really synergetic with her debuffing identity. Now Gunthra has become a great green cav nuke, though she needs to be careful of debuffing units with Unity skills, particularly Fallen Ike, who can turn all those penalties into buffs. Personally, I gave my Gunthra Panic Smoke 3 to help put even more penalties on her enemies. Her fodder nowadays is mainly attack res solo 4, which is good but not great. As for art, I always found it to be okay, but not great. I think it's the hat that I'm not really fond of, personally. I give her 3 stars. She spent a long time being possibly the worst wind legendary and having awful fodder, but her refine and remix bumped her up from 2 stars in my opinion. I may have rated her higher if her weapon or Chilling Seal 2 gave her Canto, but even without it, she's pretty good nowadays. Legendary Ike is our first non-Fey OC legendary hero, which really hyped me up back in the day. He is a sword infantry earth legendary who grants attack. His stats are relatively balanced with highest defense and low res. His weapon is the Ragnall, the same weapon that OG Ike has, which grants him distant counter, giving him a good enemy phase. His unique special Radiant Ether is essentially Ether with 4 cooldown instead of 5. He's able to ramp into it with his Warding Breath skill, which also gives him some resistance on enemy phase. The rest of his kit was okay at the time. Seal Attack Defense 2 and Defense Tactic 3 were okay, but over time, these would get replaced. His fodder was okay. The only thing worth foddering off was Warding Breath. As an enemy phase unit, Ike eventually got phased out, as his stats could not keep up with power creep. He desperately needed something, and IS answered back with a legendary remix and then a weapon refine. He was given Joint Drive Res, which helps his low res a little. Radiant Ether 2 now decreases its cooldown by 2 at the start of turn 1, which means he can now return with an Ether after being hit if he has a cooldown acceleration. Or does he? His Refine retains distant counter and now has a slaying effect and gives him +4 to all stats in combat. By itself, it's a pretty weak Refine, but it now frees up both his A slot and Sacred Seal slot from having to use a breath skill. I gave mine Special Spiral, which allows him to answer back with Ether all the time, which is a pretty fun build. However, all of this wasn't enough to get Ike out of his slump. He doesn't hit quite hard enough and can't tank enough damage. His Radiant Ether 2's healing also gets shut down by Fatal Smoke 3, which is pretty common in competitive modes. As for fodder, it's okay with Warding Breath and Joint Drive Res, but it's not fantastic, especially since breath skills work better as seals. As for his art, I think it's pretty good, as he's drawn by the wonderful Kita Senri. However, I don't think it's her greatest work. I give Ike 2 stars. He was great towards the beginning of the game, but after his remix and refine, I don't see a future where he rises back to prominence. Up next is Legendary Ephraim. He is a Lance Cavalry Fire legendary who grants defense. His stats focus mainly on attack and defense and has pretty low speed and res. He bypasses his low speed with his weapon Flame Siegmund, which gives him an automatic follow-up attack when he's surrounded by more enemies than allies within 2 spaces, playing into the idea that he likes to jump into the action ahead of his allies. His unique B skill, Solar Brace, helps him restore HP whenever his special triggers during combat. If you give him a special that deals damage, he essentially has a mini Ether. The rest of his base kit is kind of awkward. Sturdy Stance 2 is for the enemy phase, but enemy phase units like to be closer to their allies in order to gain support bonuses. But Flame Siegmund discourages that. Fortified Defense 3 grants defense to his adjacent allies, but when you consider his solo playstyle, it's not great. His fodder was okay for a bit until Sturdy Stance 2 became more accessible from 4-star Altina. His weapon refine made his follow-up requirement much easier to fulfill, only requiring him to be solo or initiate combat. It also decreases the attack and defense on the foe during combat by 5, and gives him special cooldown ramping if his HP is 25% or greater. It synergizes really well with his new Solar Brace 2 skill, which gives him Canto 2, Null Guard, and restores 10 HP after combat. This now makes Ephraim a decent Gale Force unit. It also means there's no opportunity cost of using Solar Brace 2 and not having a Trace skill, since it includes Canto. He was also given Attack Defense Solo 4, which doubles down on his strength. His fodder now is okay. The only skill worth getting is Attack Defense Solo 4. Overall, I find that Ephraim is not too bad after his remix and refine. He's a competent Gale Force unit, but since he heals himself after battle, he may be hard to use as a Wings of Mercy beacon. In terms of his art, I really like it. It's drawn by Asatani Tomio, and I always really love their work. I give Ephraim 3 stars. He's a bit one-dimensional, but he does what he does well. Up next is Legendary Female Robin. She is a colorless dragon flying earth legendary who grants speed. She has pretty balanced stats with no clear weaknesses to exploit. Her weapon Expiration gives her distant counter and the adaptive damage that targets the lower of the foe's defense and res. Her unique A skill, Dragon Skin, neutralizes her flying weakness and grants her +4 defense and resistance on enemy phase. The rest of her kit is alright. Cancel Affinity 3 is relatively useless, as there are not too many units who have color advantage over colorless units, and Res Smoke 3 is okay and is a pretty rare skill. The only other unit who has it is Bronya. Back then, Robin was pretty scary in Arena. She can get really scary as a raid boss unit when given a lot of buffs and support. However, good old power creep eventually phased her out. Her fodder is not great. She can only give Cancel Affinity 3 and Res Smoke 3, none of which are very good. Since her weapon has Distant Counter built into it, it's a fair bet that her refine isn't going to be too crazy. It grants her plus 4 to all stats, and has guard if her HP is greater than or equal to 25%, which is just okay. Her remix gives her Dragon Skin 2, which retains the Iod's shield effect, but also gives her plus 6 to all stats and neutralizes the foe's bonuses, either during her enemy phase or if the foe's HP has 75 or more, which is pretty good since bonuses are pretty common in Arena. So during enemy phase, she can gain plus 10 to all stats, which is pretty sweet. She was also given Speed Res Rain 3, which helps her speed and damage output. Her fodder is still pretty weak, with the Rain skill being the only skill worth getting. Her art is okay, but I don't like it as much as her fallen male counterpart. I guess I'm just not the biggest female Robin fan. I give her 3 stars. She's not the worst Earth Legendary, but that's only because Ike also happens to be an Earth Legendary. Legendary Lyn is a green bow infantry wind legendary who grants attack. She was released at the time when IS had already released 4 Lyn alts, so a lot of people kind of had enough with Lyn. For the longest time, Lyn was considered the worst legendary hero by most people. She's pretty fast and her res wasn't bad, but her attack and defense were really low. Her weapon Swift Molagear grants her attack and speed when she has more allies than foes within 2 spaces. Her unique A skill, Laws of Sakai, gives her all stats plus 4 during the enemy phase and when she has 2 or more allies around her. This is just awful as her stat spread is not suitable for an enemy phase playstyle. Most people just replaced it with something else. The rest of her kit was okay. Rally Defense Res helped her score better in Arena. Desperation is okay, but it may be difficult for her to get under 75% HP, as she's most likely going to be either 100% HP or 0% HP. Speed Tactic is mostly to help her allies, not her. In terms of fodder, Speed Tactics is the only rare-ish skill she has. So yeah, Lyn desperately needed her refine and remix. Her remix gives her Laws of Sakai 2, which gives her plus 6 to all stats when she initiates, and has Fire Sweep effect if she hits a speed benchmark. The addition of Joint Drive Speed helps make her speed demon. Her refine gives her plus 5 to attack and speed if she's within 3 spaces of an ally, and she disables the skills of enemies outside of battle, making her similar to Bramimond. Additionally, if she initiates combat, she gets another plus 5 to attack and speed, and deals damage equal to 15% of her speed, which really helps out with her damage output. Lyn went from a pretty bad unit to pretty good after her remix and refine. Her fodder is pretty good now, mainly because Joint Drive Speed is amazing. In terms of art, it's absolutely phenomenal. She's drawn by Wada Sachiko, so it's kind of a no-brainer that I'm going to love it. I give her 3 stars. I probably would have given her 1 star before her remix and refine, but I really think they helped her enough to increase her rating by 2 stars. Up next is Legendary Ryoma. He is a sword-flying water legendary who grants defense. He's got a really good attack and speed, but is a little lacking in defense and res. He comes with the Raijinto, the same weapon as OG Ryoma, and it grants him distant counter. His unique B skill, Bushido, grants him plus 10 damage whenever his special triggers, making him a strong nuke. For a while, Ryoma also had an identity crisis. He wants to be an enemy phase unit with Kestrel Stance 2 and distant counter in his weapon, but his low bulk and weaknesses against arrows and other flying effective weapons really makes it a challenge. In terms of fodder, he was the sole holder of Kestrel Stance 2 for a long time, making it easier to fodder Kestrel Stance 3 for someone else. Guidance is also not bad, but probably not the main reason you're foddering him. Because of his strong offense and weak defense, I remember seeing Ryoma use Fire Sweep Sword and focus on Plater Face rather than Raijinto. His remix gave him Bushido 2, which nullifies his flyer weakness, gives him plus 7 damage all the times, and speed-based damage reduction, which flyers typically don't have access to. This change helped his enemy phase potential greatly. He was also given Attack Speed Rain 3, which helps out both him and his allies in combat. Since he has a distant counter weapon, there were some fears that his refine might be bad, but it's actually pretty good. He keeps distant counter and also gains all stats plus 4 if he initiates or is within 2 spaces of an ally. He also gets null follow-up in his weapon, which as a flyer he wouldn't normally have. All this made Ryoma a pretty good mixed phase unit. His fodder now is okay. Not the only sole holder of Kestrel Stance 2 anymore, and attack speed rain is only decent fodder. His art is pretty good. I think his art is better than OG Ryoma, both of whom are drawn by Kira Senri. I give him 3 stars. He wasn't great for a long time, but after his remix and refine, he's now got a lot going for him. Legendary Hector is an Axe Armor Fire legendary who grants attack. He has really high attack and defense, okay res, and low speed, which you would expect given Hector's previous ults. His Thunder Armads denies the foe's follow-up attack if he is surrounded by more allies than foes within 2 spaces. Simple, yet effective. His unique C skill, Osteus Pulse, is quite interesting. It's similar to Infantry Pulse in that at the start of turn 1, he grants all his allies special cooldown count -1, not just for infantry units. However, this will only happen if he fulfills a tactics requirement. It's not a super strict requirement, but it does require paying attention to your team comp. It's really good at initiating Gale Force strats. The rest of his kit is pretty good as well. He comes with Distant Counter and Vengeful Fighter 3, both of which are great for the enemy phase. Both of these skills also make Hector great fodder, especially for melee armor units. Hector's remix gives him Osteus Pulse 2, which gives both him and his allies +6 to defense and resistance, and essentially times pulse. It's no longer limited to only turn 1, but it still requires a tactic team comp. This addition continues to make Hector great on Gale Force teams. However, there is an opportunity cost of using Osteus Pulse, in that he can't also have a Savior skill. He was also given Crafty Fighter, which helps deny his enemies' specials from triggering. His weapon Refine inflicts penalties on attack and defense, and denies his foe a follow-up attack as long as it's within 3 spaces of an ally, which is pretty easy to maintain. Additionally, during enemy phase, he inflicts more penalties on attack and defense, and also reduces the damage from foe's first attack by 40%. All of this makes Hector pretty tanky. His fodder continues to be great, with the addition of Crafty Fighter. In terms of his art, since he's drawn by Wada Sachiko, you guessed it, I really like it. I personally think it's the best Hector art in the game. I give Hector 4 stars, borderline 5 stars. If he would have been able to have Osteus Pulse and a Savior skill, he definitely would have been 5 stars. But for now, I think 4 stars is fair. Legendary Lucina is a blue bow infantry wind legendary who grants speed. She's got a glass cannon stat line with high attack and speed and low defense and res. Her weapon, Thone, I think that's how it's pronounced, grants her all stats +4 if she initiates against a melee unit, which is alright. What really makes her a pain is her unique assist skill, Future Vision, which is essentially a swap and a once per turn self-dance after assisting. This skill has definitely messed me up a lot, mostly in Arena where she snipes a squishy unit. She came with Swift Sparrow 2, which is pretty good, Wings of Mercy 3, which allows her to assist an ally from across the map, and Distant Counter 3, which is a good support skill, but doesn't really help her in combat in any way. Her fodder was okay. Swift Sparrow 2 is nice, Wings of Mercy can be nabbed from a 4-star Cane, and Distant Guard is great to give to support units. Her remix gave her Future Vision 2, which added attack defense snag on top of its original effect. I can understand why they gave it a more tame remix since it was good as is. She was also given Swift Sparrow 3, which is almost universally good on speedy units. Her weapon Refine has a lot of synergy with Future Vision 2. Whenever a movement skill is used by her or on her, she and her ally gains a status that guarantees a follow-up attack if they initiate combat. Needless to say, being given a free follow-up attack is really good, especially since she could give it to any movement type. She also gains +4 to all stats during combat if she initiates it or is within 2 spaces of an ally. She also now has the pledging effect with attack, speed, and defense, which is great since she has a snag skill in Future Vision 2. Her fodder got a lot better simply because she now has Swift Sparrow 3. As for art, I think it's pretty good. It's the only time Yamada Kataro illustrated her in Heroes, and I think he did a great job. I give her 4 stars. She doesn't hit super hard, but her ability to debuff is really useful. Also, she has Future Vision. Need I say more? Legendary Marth is a sword infantry fire legendary who grants resistance. He's got a great offensive stat line but lowish res. His weapon, the Exalted Falchion, has dragon effectiveness and grants him bonus doubler, which is pretty good but is susceptible to lull skills and other effects that neutralize his bonuses. He has a unique special called Fire Emblem, which boosts his damage by 30% of his speed, and then grants him and his allies +4 bonuses to all stats, which synergizes well with his weapon. He was also given a unique B skill, Binding Shield, which gives him Fire Sweep and a follow-up attack against dragons. making him the ultimate Dragon Slayer. He came with Attack Speed Bond 3, which is good but requires positioning, and Infantry Flash, which is an interesting support skill but never really took off. His fodder is okay. Attack Speed Bond 3 is the main reason to fodder him off, as Infantry Flash 3 isn't very good. His remix gave him Binding Shield 2, which now gives him a guaranteed follow-up and a fire sweep effect not just on dragons, but all enemies in general if he can meet a speed requirement. This makes his player face really scary now. He was also given Shining Emblem, the unique special from Brave Marth. At the start of turn, it gives him +6 to all stats if he's within 2 spaces of his allies, and gives his allies +6 attack. His damage is also boosted by 35% of his speed, and after his special triggers, he gives all his allies +6 to all stats. The stats given to him at the start of turn synergizes well with bonus doubler in his weapon. Speaking of his weapon, his Refine keeps bonus doubler, gives him +4 to all stats if he has a bonus or is above 50% HP, and gives him Omni Unity. It's pretty common to see him get +30 to all stats during the battle forecast, which makes initiating against him pretty difficult. One fun build is to give him bonus doubler in his A slot and Sacred Seal, and give him the bonus doubler effect either from Legendary Eli Wood or Astrid, effectively giving him quadruple bonus doubler. As usual, this is very susceptible to lulls and bonus neutralization effects. His fodder has not changed since his rework, so by modern standards, it's not really good. He's drawn by my boy Daisuke Izuka, who always does a great job with Marth in my opinion. I give Marth 4 stars. He went from Dragon Slayer to Everyone Slayer and can be really terrifying at his full potential. Legendary Young Tiki is up next. She's a blue dragon armor legendary who grants defense. Her stats are all pretty balanced with no clear weakness, with a standout in defense. Her weapon Divine Mist grants her dragon effectiveness and distant counter, as well as adaptive damage. Tiki follows in Marth's footsteps in being a great Dragon Slayer, though more mixed phase than player phase. Her unique C skill, with Everyone, grants her and her adjacent allies +5 to defense and res, which helps increase her team's bulk. She came with Fierce Breath, which gave her attack and special cooldown ramping during enemy phase. For player phase, she has Bold Fighter, which gives her a follow-up attack and cooldown ramping in player phase. Needless to say, Tiki was a menace in both phases. Her fodder was pretty good, as she can pass down both Fierce Breath and Bold Fighter to an armor unit. For her remix, Tiki got With Everyone too, which now grants +6 to defense and res to both her and allies within 2 spaces. Pretty nice, but the more important addition is Far Save along with +4 to all stats in battle. This is great, as now there is no opportunity cost in running With Everyone over a save skill. It is a save skill. It also saved you from foddering a save skill to her, as she gets With Everyone 2 for free. She was also given Slick Fighter 3, which now focuses on her enemy phase more. Her weapon Refine retains the original effect and also gives her +4 to all stats during combat, and inflicts a penalty on foe's attack equal to 75% of Tiki's bonuses on defense and res. Since With Everyone 2 gives her +6 to defense and res, she can inflict -9 on that foe's attack, which is pretty good. Her fodder is still pretty good. She can still pass down Fierce Breath and can now either pass down Bold or Slick Fighter 3. Slick Fighter is the better of the two in this day and age, but for player-faced armor units, Bold Fighter is still pretty good. I've never been a fan of her art. I think her special art is pretty underwhelming. There's definitely better Young Tiki art than this. I give her 4 stars. She scored well in Arena in the past, and today is great as a Dragon Slayer and Far Savior. Up next is Legendary Erica. She's a Sword Cavalry Water Legendary who grants attack. She has a good offensive stat line, decent-ish defense, and lowish res. Her weapon Storm Seeklin gives her +3 to defense and res and special cooldown ramping as long as she's within more foes than allies within 2 spaces. This requirement is the same as a non-refined Flame Siegmund and is pretty easy to fulfill since she's a cavalry unit. Her unique B skill, Lunar Brace, allows her to deal 50% of the foe's defense as extra damage when her special triggers. However, this comes with a huge penalty of +1 special cooldown count, which inherently makes triggering specials harder. I guess the devs were afraid Erica was going to be a huge menace, but it made Erica a hard-to-use nuke. She introduced Attack Speed Solo 3, which greatly adds to her offense just by being solo. She also had Odd Defense Wave 3, which is okay but inconsistent. The main fodder she had worth picking up was Attack Speed Solo 3, which was pretty good fodder back then. Her remix gave her Lunar Brace 2, which gives her Canto 2, no follow-up, and she now deals 15% of foes' defense as damage, special or no special hit. This makes her a lot more consistent and easier to use. She also was given Attack Speed Solo 4, which is only a marginal improvement over Attack Speed Solo 3, but it's nice to have. Her Refine gives her +4 to all stats and cooldown ramping as long as she's solo, easier to fulfill compared to its original effect. Additionally, she gets another +4 to all stats and dodge-based damage reduction, which Cavalry can't normally have. This stat bump helps out her outdated stats, and the dodge increases her survivability, something she had some troubles with. Because she doesn't require a damage special to get her extra damage, I like to use her as a Gale Force unit since she has special ramping. Her fodder improved as marginally as Attack Speed Solo 4 benefited her, which is to say, only by a little bit. Her art is really good in my opinion. I always like it when Erika is drawn by Asatani Tomoyo, maybe even better than Wada. I give Erika 4 stars. She continues to deal great damage, and the addition of Dodge and Kanto make her a lot easier to use now. Harid is the last Niffle sibling to be made a legendary. He is a Sword Cavalry Wind legendary who grants defense. He is a defensive cav who excels in attack and defense with speed as his dump stat. His weapon, Gyol, gives him a follow-up attack and denies his foe's follow-up attack if the foe has a penalty. Simple, yet effective. His unique B skill, Freezing Seal, helps out with this by inflicting -6 penalties on attack and speed on the foe with the lowest res. This would normally be nice to inflict, but since Harid is already really slow, it doesn't really benefit him if he lowers his foe's speed. But it can definitely help his allies. He has Distant Counter, an incredible enemy phase skill, and Attack Smoke 3, which helps inflict more penalties on his foes. His fodder was good, mainly because Distant Counter is insanely nice to get. His remix gives him Freezing Seal 2, which inflicts -7 attack and defense and guard on foes with the lowest res and the foes within 2 spaces from them. The switch from speed to defense penalty is so much better for Harid himself, increasing his damage output. His remix also gave him Attack Defense Menace. The penalty from it doesn't stack on Freezing Seal 2, but it can hit foes that aren't already hit by Sealing Seal 2 and give Harid some bonuses. His Refine keeps its original effect and inflicts -5 to attack and defense during combat if the foe has a penalty or his HP is greater than 25%. Additionally, he inflicts an additional -5 to attack and defense during combat and gains a Pledgian effect on attack and defense if he initiates or is within 2 spaces of an ally. Given that he inflicts penalties everywhere with his base kit, he comes fully decked with everything he needs to succeed. His fodder became a whole lot better after his remix. DC plus Attack Defense Menace are a great combo, only needing either Threaten Attack 1 or Threaten Defense 1 to get both skills. As for art, it's pretty good, though I don't have any strong feelings either way. I give him 3 stars. He's pretty good at what he does, but I get the feeling he's used more as fodder than an actual unit. Legendary Azura is the last legendary to grant a legendary stat bonus to her allies. Well, at least for a while anyways. She is a blue tome flying water legendary who grants res. She's got pretty decent offensive stats for a dancer unit, with a paper-thin defense and okay-ish res. Her weapon, Prayer Wheel, grants bonuses to the dance unit's attack, speed, defense, or res equal to the highest bonus they already have. So if they already have +6 bonus to attack, then Azura will then give them +6 speed, defense, and res as well. A pretty great buffing effect. On a side note, when my parents visited Tibet about 3 years ago, my parents were able to get a prayer wheel. It's pretty neat, and its importance to Buddhism is really interesting. Anyways, her unique assist, Grey Waves, is what shot her up to meta-defining. It grants the dance unit 1 extra move if they're either an infantry or flying unit. This is pretty good in the player's hand, but it's absolutely terrifying in the AI's hand, as it makes their turn a lot less predictable and scary. These 2 things made Azura the best dancer in the game for quite some time. She came with B Dual Flying 3, which helps her score better in Arena, Aerobatics 3, which helps the mobility of non-flying allies, and Attack Tactic 3, which helps give her allies buffs, which she can then spread to the rest of their stats after she dances them. Her fodder was okay. B Dual Flying 3 helps other blue flying units score better in Arena. Aerobatics was a great support skill back then, and Attack Tactic 3 is okay, but 4-star Legault also has it. Because of how good she has been, Azura's remix and refine were relatively tame. Her remix gave her Grey Waves 2, which retains the original effect and also gives the dance unit the null panic status, ensuring the bonuses on her allies are safe. Not a crazy upgrade, but still a great addition. She was also given Attack Speed Push 4, a great offensive skill to have in case she needs to enter combat. Her weapon Refine retains its original effect and also grants +6 bonus to speed to her allies within 2 spaces, allowing her to not rely on other skills to grant bonuses. She's also given essentially Triangle Adept 3. This may seem useful at first but may actually be detrimental as she may be more easily baited by ret units instead of dancing. In any case, it's still not a bad refine. In my opinion, she's still a top 5 dancer in the game. Her fodder is pretty good, mainly from attack speed push 4. I don't know if the rest of her skills are worth picking up anymore. I give Azura 5 stars. She was really scary when she first came out and still remains someone you need to play around in the AI's hands. I think she'll remain a top 5 dancer for the rest of the game's history. Legendary Roy debuted a new type of legendary heroes, the pair-up heroes, who instead of giving a stat bonus, is able to be paired up with another ally similar to the pair-up system in Awakening and Fates. This can be used in certain game modes such as Allegiance battles. Pair-up heroes also come with a dual effect that helps them score better in Arena. Anyways, Roy is a sword infantry fire legendary with pair-up. His offensive stats are pretty good and his defensive stats aren't bad either. His weapon Dragon Bind gives him distant counter and effectiveness against dragons, which is almost the same weapon that legendary Tiki has. This gives him a good enemy phase and helps him slay dragons well. His unique C skill, Human Virtue, gives both him and his allies +6 attack and speed bonuses as long as they're not dragon or beast units. Seems pretty exclusionary to me, but it's an alright support ability. He introduced bonus Doubler 3, which grants in-combat bonuses to each stat based on the bonuses on the unit. Not bad, but like with legendary Marth, this skill gets shut down by lulls and bonus neutralization skills. He also came with Renewal 3, which is just hilariously lame to have, but could be a reference from the Binding Blade where Roy can use the Binding Blade to restore 30 HP to himself. So Roy is basically a speedy enemy phase Dragon Slayer. Not too bad, but his base kit really needs to be replaced with better stuff. However, he became underwhelming very quickly, as his stats could not keep up with power creep and his weapon and unique skill were just not good enough. In terms of fodder, bonus Doubler 3 is the only thing worth getting, and even then is not exactly OP or anything. Roy's remix gave him Human Virtue 2, which now gives +6 attack and speed bonuses to non-beast and non-dragon allies within 2 spaces. He also gains in-combat bonuses to his attack, speed, defense, and res from the highest bonus his allies have, excluding beast and dragon allies. This effect is sort of like OG Caden's weapon effect, but instead of him lending bonuses, he borrows them from his allies. Also, these bonuses do not stack, so having a bunch of allies near him won't give him a billion extra stats or anything. Human Virtue 2 also allows him to reduce the damage from the foe's first hit by X%, X being the total bonuses of his allies within 2 spaces excluding beasts and dragons, capping at 40%. This damage reduction is joined by the addition of Spurn 3, which provides dodge-based damage reduction. The double damage reduction can greatly increase Roy's survivability, though this is shut down with Deadeye, Lethality, Legendary Nana, anything with %-based damage reduction nullification. His weapon Refine retains its original effect, and also gives him +4 to all stats, special cooldown ramping, and null guard when his HP is greater than or equal to 25%. Yeah, it's not super great. I don't think we're going to see Legendary Roy near the upper echelons of the meta anytime soon. His fodder now is pretty good, if only because he now has Spurn 3. But bonus doubler can be fine to inherit as well, though he can't pass them both at the same time. For his art, I think it's pretty good. This is the only time the artist Mecha has drawn him, and I think they did a great job drawing his Great Lord class. I give Roy 3 stars. He really needed a lot more from his remix and refine, but what they gave him is still alright. Legendary Alma is a colorless bow infantry earth legendary with pair up. He's got good attack and speed, but bad defense and res, making him a glass cannon. This suits him just fine, as archers generally want to be player phase oriented anyways. His weapon Luna Arc allows him to deal 25% of the foe's defense as damage if he initiates combat. This true damage is increased with his unique special Lunar Flash, which boosts his damage by 20% of his speed, as well as decrease the defense and res of the foe by 20%. This makes Alma extremely threatening, as even tanks would have trouble surviving a Lunar Flash. He has Darting Blow 4, which I guess is okay since Lunar Flash's damage increases by speed, but it only increases it by like 1 or 2 extra damage. You're much better off giving him an attack and speed boosting A skill. He also has Null Follow-Up, great when going up against units that try to deny his follow-up attacks. Finally, he has Odd Attack Wave 3. Not a bad buffing skill, but it's inconsistent. Legendary Alma was quite the terror for a while, but over time, units kept getting tankier, either with damage reduction skills or save skills, and if they counterattacked, he would go down fast. His fodder is mainly null fall of 3, as darting below 4 is not good and odd attack wave 3 is an inconsistent buffing skill. In his remix, Alma gets Lunar Flash 2, which has the same effect as the original, now with percent-based damage reduction nullification, basically making it a better Deadeye. He also gets Times Pulse 3, which allows him to get Lunar Flash 2 down to 1. For his refine, he still deals 25% of his foe's defense per attack, and now gains plus 5 to attack and speed if he initiates or is within 2 spaces of an ally. It explicitly says that when calculating the defense for his attack boost, it is not decreased by a special that decreases his enemy's defense, like Lunar Flash 2. I'm not sure if that was the case before the refine, but at least they tell us now. Additionally, he gains another plus 5 to attack and speed, null guard, and wind sweep if his HP is greater than or equal to 25%. So looks like Legendary Alma is following in the footsteps of other Alms in the game by getting wind sweep in his weapon, though his wind sweep requires his speed to be 5 or more than his foe's, which in this day and age may be hard to get. Null guard is also nice, as it basically guarantees he'll hit with Lunar Flash 2. The extra stats and extra true damage is also really nice. It's a little too early to tell how he'll fare in the meta nowadays, but he's definitely a lot better now. His fodder improved slightly. He can give darting below 4, though why would anyone want that really? And either null fall of 3 or times pulse 3, so there's more options now. I guess you could give both null fall up 1 and times pulse 3 at once, as null follow up 1 is the same as null follow up 3 if his HP is at 100%, but that's assuming you could keep him nice and healthy. As for art, it's really good. I always thought his Conqueror class looks really cool and love how his cape looks here. I'm not the biggest fan of Arai Turuko's work, but they did a great job here. I give Alm 4 stars. I'm not convinced his remix and refine made him the menace he once was, but he can still dish out great damage. Legendary Eli Wood is a Sword Cavalry Wind legendary with pair up. He's got pretty balanced stats aside from his res, which is incredibly low. His weapon Ardent Durandal gives the ally with the highest attack the bonus doubler status. This however does not include himself. Bonus doubler as an A skill may be somewhat inconsistent, but as a status it's pretty good. His unique C skill, Vision of Arcadia, gives the ally with the highest attack plus 6 attack and defense bonuses as long as there's a beast or dragon in his team. This makes him a fantastic support ally, especially when trying to buff a raid boss unit. His assist skill, Rally Speed Res Plus, helps round out the rest of the bonuses he can give to the highest attack ally. His B skill, Chill Attack 3, increases his supporting capabilities, and his A skill, Death Blow 4, helps his combat in case he needs to fight. Since Ardent Durandal and Vision of Arcadia are able to buff multiple allies, having multiple units with the same attack improves his supporting capabilities even more. His base kit works well enough, but I think a Ruse skill is better to have. His fodder is pretty good. He can pass on Rally, Speed Res Plus, and Death Blow 4 easily. As for its art, you probably guessed it, I think it's fantastic. Another great work from Wada Sachiko. I give Eli Wood 4 stars. He's a great support unit to have on any team. Legendary Julia is the first legendary hero from Drukdrol. She is a Blue Tome Infantry Earth legendary with pair up. Her stats are pretty lopsided, focusing mostly on attack and res. Her weapon, Virtuous Naga, grants her dragon effectiveness and gives her plus 6 attack and res during combat if her attack is greater than her opponent's. Nothing super crazy here. Her unique B skill, Light and Dark, is essentially an Omni-Lol skill. It also disables adaptive damage dragons have, allowing her to tank them well. Since bonuses are common in Arena, Light and Dark is really useful for Julia there. She comes with Mirror Impact, a fantastic player face skill, and Attack Res 03, an okay self-buffing skill. Legendary Julia hits pretty hard, but when she's unable to one-hit KO someone, she's likely to be taken out herself. She also doesn't have a way to get a guaranteed follow-up attack on her own, so she really needs to make her first attack count. As fodder, Julia mostly supplies Mirror Impact, a great skill for those who need some extra resistance. I've never been a biggest fan of her art, but I think it's the best Julia art in the game so far. I give Julia 3 stars. A pretty good dragon slaying nuke. Legendary Leaf is up next. Fun fact, I believe he is the only legendary hero assigned to 2 games, Genealogy the Holy War and Thracia 776. He's a colorless bow cavalry water legendary with pair up. He focuses mainly on his attack and ditches his speed, with decent defense and res for bow cav. His weapon, the Meisterbogen, is essentially a dual phase brave bow with higher might. It also denies the foe's follow-up attacks during player phase if he's under the player's control, not the AI's. This is the only effect I'm aware of that indicates player control. Let me know if I'm missing one. His weapon explains why he ditched his speed stat. He doesn't need it. His unique special is Neuron's Zeal, which gives him another action, though it restricts both his and his pair-up allies' movement to 1. A little harsh, but considering the fact that ranged cav units don't have access to Gale Force, it's the next best thing. He also comes with the unique B skill OG Leaf has, S-Drink, which at the start of turn 1, restores his HP and grants special cooldown count -1. This is especially useful since it reduces Neuron's Zeal to 2, so his double attack will trigger it. It's also nice to have during multi-map battles like chain challenges. He comes with attack res push 4, which effectively lets him deal extra 14 damage. He also has defense smoke 3, which weakens his foes for him to attack again after his special triggers. Legendary Leaf is really fun to use with just his base kit. He's definitely tripped me up in arena a couple times, where he would pop a squishy unit I would have behind my tank when his special triggers. I've seen some close counter Vantage builds floating around, but most people seem to keep his player face playstyle, giving him Death Blow 4 for crazy damage. His fodder is okay. The only things he can give are attack res push 4 and defense smoke 3, which can be acquired from a 5-star Wrath. In terms of art, it's okay, but he doesn't really look like Leaf to me. I mean, he's wearing the same clothes and has brown hair, but that's about it. I prefer his OG alt art. I give Leaf 4 stars. He's fun to use and is relatively threatening, unless you have a far save unit handy. Legendary Celica is a green tome infantry fire legendary with pair up. She has a glass cannon stat line with good attack and speed, low defense, and okay-ish res. Her weapon, Saintly Seraphim, deals 25% of the foe's res as damage when she initiates combat. This is exactly the same as Alm's original weapon's effect, only his does it with defense. Her unique B skill, Soul of Zephyr, is essentially Desperation and Null follow-up all in one. Both of these are great offensive skills to have together, though Celica will need to decrease her HP to get Desperation. She comes with Swift Sparrow 3, a great offensive skill, and Attack Speed 03, an okay self-buffing skill. Needless to say, you don't want to be on the receiving end of her player phase. Swift Sparrow 3 is the main reason you would want to fodder her off, which is pretty good. Her art is pretty good as well. It's cool to see her in the Regain class, though I'm not the biggest fan of the face she makes in her damaged art. It just seems off to me. I give her 4 stars. She's a pretty simple unit who excels in player phase. Legendary Krom is a blue bow infantry water legendary with pair up. He's got good attack and defense and subpar speed and res. His weapon, Rangrither, has armor effectiveness in addition to his standard flying effectiveness. Additionally, if his opponent's HP is at 100%, he neutralizes his own penalties and inflicts -6 attack and defense during battle. So yeah, Krom's going to hit pretty hard. Now what made him go from good to insane is his unique assist skill, to change fate. It's similar to Lucina's Future Vision in that it self-dances him after he uses it, but this time the movement skill is akin to reposition. He also grants both him and his pair-up ally +6 attack bonuses, but inflicts isolation on himself, preventing him from using to change fate again and also preventing others from assisting him as well, at least until he acts again. Yeah, it's not as good as Future Vision, but his high attack and armor effectiveness makes up for it, and then some. He has Close Counter, which gives him a great enemy phase, Lull Attack Defense 3 to increase his damage and survivability, and Rouse Defense Res 3, an okay self-buffing skill. Krom is great as is, but I've seen many people use a speed-based legendary Krom. Not necessarily to get doubles, but to deny the opponent's doubles to survive and hit back hard on his turn. And given the fact that he's an archer, he can use Deadeye and destroy any foe who tries to tank using %-based damage reduction. Yeah, Krom was the bane of my existence in Arena during water season, and is still threatening over 2 years after his release. His fodder is fantastic, able to pass down Close Counter and Lull Attack Defense 3 all at once. No prerequisites required. As for his art, it's cool, but I'm not the biggest fan of it. I don't mean to dunk on Hino Shinosuke, but I'm not the biggest fan of his work. I give Krom 5 stars. Fantastic unit, great fodder, will easily stay relevant for a long time. Legendary Edelgard is an Axe Armor Fire legendary with pair up. All her stats besides speed are pretty good. Her weapon, Amir, inflicts -6 attack and defense and combat penalties to her foe and denies their follow-up attack if she's solo. A relatively simple effect. Her unique B skill, Raging Storm, is what really makes her special. If she initiates combat, she gets to act again in the same turn as long as she's solo. Additionally, she gets a guaranteed follow-up attack if she's fighting either a dragon or beast unit. This makes Edelgard the first unit in the game able to take 3 actions in one turn on her own when given Gale Force, an extremely powerful and unique effect. I don't know how many times an Edelgard attacked my tank and then moved over to attack my support unit behind my tank. Definitely something you need to account for when fighting her. She comes with Attack Res Solo 3, which synergizes with her solo playstyle, and Armor Stride 3, which gives her 1 extra movement if she starts the turn solo. So Edelgard really shines when she's left on her own, but therein lies her biggest weakness. In some game modes, particularly Aether Raid's offense, she's unable to start out solo, so she can't get Armored Stride going right away. Also, since she needs Raging Storm in her B slot, she can't use Wings of Mercy, meaning she will need to be the Wings of Mercy beacon. Despite those setbacks, if you can set her up properly, she is incredibly powerful. In Arena, she can trip you up by first attacking your tank and then run off to fight a different unit. I've also seen her use a Brave Axe to get the guaranteed 2 hits. Not a bad alternative. Her fodder isn't really good, as only Armored Stride is rare on her, and in this day and age, you'd rather have a safe skill on most tanks. Attack Res Solo 3 is okay, but not exactly rare by any means. Her art is really good. She's got a lot of warm colors, a nice combination of red, yellow, and purple. Hakan did a very good job here. I give Edelgard 4 stars. She hits hard, but can be a bit hard to use without proper positioning. Legendary Seleth is a Sword Cavalry Earth legendary with pair up. His stats are similar to Edelgard's, with only speed being his weak stat. His weapon, Virtuous Turfing, inflicts -6 to attack and defense in combat, and heals 7 HP every time he attacks, as long as the foe initiates on him, or he has less than full HP. His unique B skill, Holy War's End, gives him a guaranteed follow attack before the enemy's counterattack as long as his HP is greater than or equal to 50%, and the foe initiates. So clearly Seleth excels in enemy phase, which is something cavalry units aren't traditionally great at. He comes with Distant Counter, which works well with his kit, and Joint Hone Defense, which is not a great buffing skill in my opinion, but is nice for arena scoring I guess. I've never really felt threatened by Seleth when facing him, and it's easy to bait him into initiating combat, something he is very bad at. I'd say his enemy phase isn't that good either, as he doesn't have any damage reduction and his res isn't that good. It's sad to say, but I feel he's the most dead on arrival legendary hero in the game's history. At least his fodder isn't bad. Distant Counter is fantastic, and Joint Hone Defense, while not a great skill, can help other units score better in Arena. His art is one of the best in the game, definitely in the top 10 in the art department. I love the blue, white, and gold color scheme, and his special art is just breathtaking. I give Seleth 2 stars. He really needs his remix and refine. I mean, he really needs them. Legendary Female Krom is a colorless dragon infantry wind legendary with pair up. At the time, she had a great BST, great stats all around with no clear weaknesses. Her weapon Primordial Breath gives her special cooldown count -1 and adaptive damage. Additionally, if her foe has 100% HP or initiates combat, she gets +5 to all stats in combat and special ramping in her attack. Her unique special, Negating Fang, reduces the damage she takes by 30%, and during her counterattack, she boosts her damage by 30% of her attack. Her damage reduction is not cancelled out by Deadeye, Lethality, or any sort of percent-based damage reduction nullification. However, it is cancelled out by a certain legendary hero release down the line. With her weapon and special, she is able to take a decent amount of damage and then hit back hard. However, she is susceptible to brave hits, as only the first hit is reduced. She comes with Distant Counter, great for her enemy face playstyle, Shield Pulse 3 to synergize with Negating Fang, and Joint Drive Attack, a fantastic skill on almost any unit. Krom worked pretty well for a while, able to survive a lot of damage and dish back a powerful counterattack. However, I find that she starts to have trouble tanking new and more powerful units, such as her fellow wind legendary Sigurd. Additionally, she's starting to have trouble with her damage output. More and more units have damage reduction and she has no way of cancelling it. As for fodder, she is one of the best. Distant Counter and Joint Drive Attack can be inherited easily in one go. Shield Pulse is nice, but very niche. Her art is pretty good. Sentra did a great job with her black and purple color scheme. I always did like the Nor Noble class from Face. Also, I think it's cool that they gave her dragon form in combat a more purple color scheme, which I wish they did in Face as well. I give her 3 stars. Her stats have started to become outdated in the age of power creep, but she's still not that bad and her fodder is fantastic. Legendary Dimitri is a Lance Infantry Water Legendary with pair up. He's got great attack speed and defense but pretty low resistance. His weapon Air Bar gives him special cooldown count -1, +5 to all stats in combat if he has 25% or more HP, and dodge-based damage reduction. His unique B skill, Atrocity, boosts his damage by 25% of his attack, and inflicts -5 to all stats and +1 special cooldown count to his foes and enemies within 2 spaces of them, essentially an Omni Smoke. Atrocity essentially boosts his already super high attack, making him super scary to face off. He came with Sturdy Impact, which is a great player phase skill, and he introduced Odd Tempest 3, which increases his movement by 1 on every odd turn. Dimitri is able to thrive in both player phase and enemy phase really well. Most people take out Sturdy Impact and give him Distant Counter or any of his upgraded forms to let him excel in enemy phase. Dimitri is able to tank well on player phase with the dodge in his weapon and pose as a real threat on his turn, making him a great mixed phase unit. One build I've seen him on was with Vital Astra and Speed Smoke 4, which gives him 3 layers of dodge-based damage reduction. If he is able to get more damage reduction from allies like Flame and Elamine, he's able to decrease a lot of damage down to single digits. All of this, of course, is negated by damage reduction nullification skills, a scary one being legendary Male bileth Sublime Heaven. In terms of fodder, his most highly coveted skill is Sturdy Impact. Odd Tempest 3 is okay, but it's inconsistent, only working every odd turn. As for art, I think it's pretty bad. His proportions seem a bit off and the way he's holding his lance in his neutral art doesn't look right. Hard to believe he was drawn by Kirahana Chinatsu, the character illustrator for 3 Houses. I give him 4 stars. He still dishes out crazy damage, but his tanking abilities are hampered by his low res and the increased prevalence of damage reduction nullification. Legendary Lalena is a Red Tome Cavalry Fire Legendary with pair up. She has a pretty lopsided stat line, with really good attack and resistance and really bad speed and defense. Her weapon, Studied Foreblaze, gives her special cooldown count -1, and at the start of turn 1, gives her another special cooldown count -1. Additionally, she gains +6 attack and res in combat, and the Hardy Bearing effect if she goes into battle with greater than or equal to 25% HP. Her unique special, Gifted Magic, is an area of effect special that deals 80% of her attack minus the resistance of her foe. So it's going to deal less area of effect damage compared to something like Blazing Flame, but since it has 2 cooldown, it's much easier to use. Her weapon basically charges it up on turn 1. Needless to say, an area of effect cavalry mage is pretty scary, especially since she has built-in Hardy Bearing. She comes with Attack Res Solo 4, which usually gets replaced by Life and Death 4 to boost her area of effect damage, Sabotage Res 3 to increase the damage from Gifted Magic, and Pulse Smoke 3, which is pretty good against teams that charge up all their specials at once, like Infantry Pulse teams. Lalena is a pretty big menace in arena, ether raids, and summoner duels. Her built-in Hardy Bearing shuts down any Vantage strats, and her area of effect special essentially gives her like a brave attack. Sort of. I've seen some people run a trace skill on her to make her harder to catch. As for her fodder, her most coveted skills are Attack Res Solo 4 and Pulse Smoke 3, which are relatively easy to inherit at once. Sabotage Res 3 is a pretty good skill for a support unit. For her art, I think it's the best Lalena art in the game. She's drawn by Azutaro, and I always love their work. I give her 4 stars. She's an incredible nuke who's still threatening over a year after her release. Next up is Claude. He is a colorless bow flying earth legendary with pair up. He's got fantastic speed, good attack, and okay-ish defense and res. He comes with the Hero's Relic Fail Not, which gives him special cooldown count -1, along with +5 to all stats in battle, and no follow-up if he has 25% or more HP. His unique B skill, Fallen Star, reduces the damage from foes' first attack by 80% if he initiates, then gives himself the Fallen Star status, and inflicts gravity on the foe and foes within 1 space of them. The Fallen Star status allows Claude to reduce the first attack from the first battle and enemy phase by 80%. Needless to say, unless you have damage reduction nullification, Claude is going to be really annoying to take out. He introduced a new breed of skills, the Catch skills. He comes with Attack Speed Catch 4, which has the potential of giving him +9 to attack and speed, as long as his foe has both 100% HP and a penalty. Of course, there is a chance that it doesn't give any stat bonuses in battle if neither condition is met, so best to watch out. He also has Speed Defense Rain 3, which helps out his offensive capabilities. Yeah, Claude is an absolute beast. easily the best Earth legendary in the game, in my opinion. His base kit is good as is, but if you can give him lethality, he won't need to worry about percent base damage reduction anymore. For fodder, he can pass down attack speed catch 4 and speed defense range 3, though you'd first need to pass down attack speed catch 3 from New Year Liar if you want both. As for art, it's good, but there's something about it that I don't love. I can't really explain it. I know a minute ago I said I loved all of Azutaro's work, but I will admit this is my least favorite of their work. I give him 5 stars. He is a fantastic unit and single-handedly makes Earth Season easy. A bit too easy, actually. Legendary Sigurd joins his son as a Sword Cavalry, this time as a Wind Legendary with pair-up. He's got fantastic attack and defense, okayish resistance, and low speed. His weapon, Hollow Turfing, gives him special cooldown count -1, along with +5 to all stats in battle, a guaranteed follow-up attack, and he reduces damage from foes' first attack by 40% if Sigurd initiates combat or if he's hit by a ranged attack. His unique special Holy Knight aura is absolutely insane. He gets +1 movement at the start of turn, and when it triggers, his damage is increased by 25% of his attack. Then, after he triggered his special, even after he dies, all of his allies gain +6 attack bonuses and +1 movement. He also came with the unique B skill that OG Sigurd had, Crusader's Ward, which reduces the second ranged attack he receives by 80%. When you take into account the damage reduction he gets from his weapon, he's incredibly hard to defeat from 2 spaces. He comes with attack defense catch 4, which allows him to hit hard and tank physical attacks better, along with Fatal Smoke 3, preventing his foes from healing themselves in or out of battle. Yeah, it's definitely an understatement to say he completely changed the game when he arrived. He almost single-handedly made cavalry teams much more threatening. And with the arrival of Note in Dark Season, there was literally nowhere the enemy could hide. He is susceptible to Stall, which would reduce his movement to 1, but Stall is still relatively uncommon, so he doesn't really need to worry about it just yet. His fodder is pretty good too. He can give both attack defense catch 4 and Fatal Smoke 3, as long as you can pass down attack defense catch 3 first from 5-star Setgar, or maybe even a Zeke. Fatal Smoke 3 in particular is pretty annoying, as it can make enemy phasing teams a lot harder. In terms of art, it's probably one of the best in the game. I think most people would even say it is the best in the game. Another great one from Suzuki Rika. I give Sigurd 5 stars. An outrageously strong unit who's good in almost every game mode. Legendary Male Bileth is a green tome infantry water legendary with pair-up. He has high attack and speed with lowish defense and res. His weapon, Professorial Text, gives him special cooldown count -1, along with +5 to all stats in battle, and a joint drive null follow-up with a speed check. His unique special, Sublime Heaven, boosts Byleth's damage by 50% of his attack if the foe is a dragon or beast unit, and 25% otherwise. It also disables percent-based damage reduction. This makes Byleth a one-hit knockout nuke. It can be pretty risky to try and tank his attack. He comes with attack defense ideal 4, which can increase his attack and defense by up to 9 if he has both 100% HP and a bonus, though of course it's possible it may do nothing as well. He also has lull attack res 3 to boost his damage, and times pulse 3, which charges his Sublime Heaven up right away. Byleth is one of many reasons why Water Season is tough to get through. As a green unit, he counters fellow water legendaries such as Fioram, Krom, and Dimitri, easily able to knock them out in one hit. I've seen many use Wind Sweep since he essentially has no follow-up when near his allies. Even if he one day does become power creeped, he will remain a great support unit by giving his allies no follow-up. His fodder is pretty good. He can give attack defense ideal 4, as well as either lull attack res 3 or times pulse 3, if attack defense ideal 3 is passed down first, which can be acquired from 5-star Skahawk or 4-star Summer Leon. In terms of art, it's good. It's cool to see Byleth depicted in his Enlightened 1 class. The artist Hagiya Karu did a great job here. I give Male Byleth 5 stars. A crazy powerful nuke with fantastic support capabilities. Legendary Mikaya is a colorless infantry wind legendary with pair-up. She's got high attack and res, okay speed and low defense. Her weapon New Dawn gives her effectiveness against armored and cavalry units, as well as +6 to attack and resistance, and a guaranteed follow-up attack in combat if she either initiates or is within 2 spaces of an ally. Additionally, she gets the Desperation 2 effect. Her unique assist is Maiden Solace, which is essentially Harsh Command and Sacrifice in one. She can use Maiden Solace to try and get her HP below half to get the Desperation from her weapon. She also has a unique B skill, Prescience, which inflicts -5 attack and res on foe in battle, as well as reduce the damage from foe's first attack by 30% if she either initiates combat or if the foe is ranged. I mean, she was already going to be hard to defeat with a mage, but this makes it even harder. She comes with Fury 4 to boost her stats and decrease her HP with every battle, undoubtedly to get her into desperation range, and Joint Distant Guard, which is a 2-way Distant Guard 3. Honestly, I find Mikaya to be a little underwhelming. This is probably because she's following up on some ridiculously broken legendaries, but she's actually pretty good, able to hit hard, especially against armored and cavalry units. Her fodder is okay. She can pass down Fury 4 and Joint Distant Guard really easily, though I haven't seen too many people use Joint Distant Guard all that much. Her art is really good. Done by Hakan, she's got a lot of warm colors going on and her special art is pretty good. I give Mikaya 4 stars. Not the greatest, but I don't think she'll ever be irrelevant due to her cavalry and armor effectiveness. Legendary Fae definitely took most people by surprise. She's a blue dragon infantry earth legendary with pair up. She's got great attack, defense, and res with lowish speed. Her weapon Dazzling Breath has the usual adaptive damage, as well as inflicts -5 to all the foe's stats and prevents their follow-up attacks in the enemy phase. Additionally, she has Guard if she's within 2 spaces of an ally. Her unique special Life Unending is essentially a miracle that charges itself up at the beginning of every map and restores her HP at the first time it triggers. She comes with Distant Stance, an upgrade to Distant Counter that gives her resistance on enemy phase. She also has Dragon's Ire 3, essentially an enemy phase null follow-up for dragons, and Defense Res Menace to weaken her foes and increase her bulk. So Fae is sort of underwhelming in my opinion. Her main gimmick is to survive lethal damage and then restore herself good as new. However, Life Unending can be easily bypassed by a pulse smoke effect. It's also susceptible to brave hits, as she can still go down from the second hit. However, if you can't deal with that, she's pretty good and her special means you'll have to go through her twice, which can be pretty tough. In terms of fodder, she's actually really good. Distant Stance is just a better distant counter, Dragon's Ire 3 is great on most dragon units, and Defense Res Menace is a great self-buffing and penalty spreading skill. Her art is pretty good. I really like how poofy her wings look. Himukai Yuji did a great job with his 3rd rendition of Fae. I give her 3 stars. Her kit is a bit one-dimensional and can be rendered useless, but her fodder is one of the best in the game and that counts for something. Legendary Itri is up next. I'm sure most people expected her to be a mythic rather than a legendary unit, but whatever. She's a green tome flying fire legendary with pair up. She has good attack, not bad defense and resistance, and lowish speed. Her weapon, the Grim Broker, gives her Canto 2 for the first 4 turns. Additionally, if she initiates combat or is solo, she inflicts -6 attack and res on the foe during combat, and makes a guaranteed follow-up attack. Her unique B skill, Divine Recreation, inflicts -4 to all foe stats if they have 50% or more HP, and reduces the foe's first attack by 30%, and then boosts her counterattack by the damage she reduced. She comes with Attack Res Solo 4 and Attack Res Rain 3. Great offensive skills for her. So HG doesn't do anything too fancy, which is why I think most people may overlook her, but a combination of Canto, guaranteed follow-up attack, damage reduction, increased damage, and flying mobility makes her a big threat. She's not super easy to tank, and she can take a decent amount of damage, although she is still susceptible to bows without Iot's shield. Her fodder is pretty good. Attack Res Solo 4 and Attack Res Rain 3 are great skills to pass down to flying offensive mages. Her art is pretty good. I like her attack art, which is the same one from the Book 5 midpoint cinematic trailer. It's also cool to see her sprite do the same pose as well. Her special is freaky with the crazy eyes and toothy grin. I love it. I give her 4 stars. Not super broken or meta-defining, but a powerful offensive threat for sure. Legendary female bileth is a blue tome infantry wind legendary with pair up. She's got good attack and speed with okay defense and resistance. Her weapon, Professorial Guide, gives her special cooldown count -1, along with +5 to all stats during combat if she's within 2 spaces of an ally, and is essentially a Joint Drive Null Guard and Joint Drive Null cooldown acceleration effect. I find it pretty cool that if you have both Legendary Byleth supporting another character, they get the Creator Sword effect of the OG Byleths. Her unique C skill, Goddess Bearer, gives her +7 attack and speed bonuses, the null follow-up status, and the self-guidance effect, similar to Brave Edelgard. She comes with Ruptured Sky, a rare special skill great for Arena, along with Attack Speed Ideal 4 and Lull Speed Res 3, 2 great offensive skills. Bileth is a pretty good blue mage, excelling in mobility. However, she doesn't hit as hard as her male counterpart, and her supporting capabilities, while still pretty good, isn't as good as male Byleth's joint drive null follow-up. Her fodder is ridiculously good. She can pass down attack speed ideal 4 along with either lull speed res 3 or rupture sky. The only prerequisite is attack speed ideal 3, which you can get from a 5-star Muriel. Alternatively, you could pass down attack speed ideal 4, rupture sky, and lull speed res 2, which isn't bad as it still neutralizes the foe's speed and resistance bonuses. Her art is pretty good, though there's something about it I just don't like, but I can't exactly pinpoint what it is. Maybe it has to do with the fact that I'm not the biggest fan of female Byleth design. I give female Byleth 4 stars. A pretty decent blue tome, but even better fodder. Legendary Sita introduces a new breed of legendary heroes that has pair up and also gives a stat bonus. In Sita's case, she provides speed. She's a lance flying water legendary. She's got ridiculously high speed, great attack, and okay-ish defense and resistance. Her weapon is the Wing Lifted Spear, which grants her Canto 2 in effectiveness against armored and cavalry units, just like in Shadow Dragon and New Mystery of the Emblem. Additionally, she gets +5 to all stats in battle if she initiates combat or is within 2 spaces of an ally, as well as the ability to steal her enemy's bonuses, similar to Freya's Binding Necklace B skill. Her unique B skill, Faithful Loyalty, is pretty interesting. If an armor or cavalry enemy initiates combat against her, she can counterattack first, which is essentially Vantage. She also neutralizes effects that prevent her own follow-up attacks. Then, after battle, she grants herself the Vantage status, which allows her to counterattack first if her enemy initiates combat, and this time is not just for armored and cavalry units. She comes with Distant Storm, an upgraded distant counter where she gets +5 attack in combat at the expense of recoil damage. She also has attack defense range 3 to increase her damage. So Sita is trying to be a Vantage unit and is pretty good against armors and cavs, but I have some issues with her. For starters, her bulk is pretty bad, so if she can't finish off her foe in one hit, she's bound to take a lot of damage. Next, she doesn't have any brave hits. Most Vantage units nowadays want brave hits so that when they stack their attack, they essentially double the damage. However, Sita doesn't really have that, so it's a tough sell. Lastly, Sita gets shut down immediately by Hardy Bearing, a common threat being legendary Lalena, who has Hardy Bearing in her weapon. So Sita has a lot working against her, but there are some teams that just can't do anything against her, such as full cav teams. Her fodder is pretty good. She can pass down distant counter and attack defense range 3 at once. If the unit already has distant counter, they can also get distant storm, though the recoil damage is a bit annoying. Her art is really great. I particularly like her special art. It's very much how I would expect the Queen of Arcanea to look. I give Sita 3 stars. A bit underwhelming, though can be fun against full cav teams. Legendary Nana is a sword cavalry earth legendary with pair up and grants resistance. She's got a great offensive stat line with mediocre defense and res. Her weapon, Land Sword, which on a side note is a weird name, gives her +6 attack and speed in combat, neutralizes effects that prevent her follow-up attacks, and then restores 7 HP after combat, and allows her to disable all percentage-based damage reduction, including damage reduction specials. Her unique B skill, Hother's Zeal, gives her Canto remaining +1, and lets her deal extra damage equal to 20% of her attack. Not only that, if Nana initiates combat, she gets a Brave attack. She comes with Attack Speed Push 4 and Attack Speed Menace to round out her offensive kit. Legendary Nana is an incredibly threatening offensive nuke, able to shred units who normally try to hide behind damage reduction. Legendary Claude is shaking in his boots. Like the other Thracia 776 legendary, she also has a Brave attack and is on a horse, and with Canto, she can be hard to reach at times. Her fodder is great. She can very easily pass down Attack Speed Push 4 and Attack Speed Menace. All that's needed is Attack Speed Push 3, which can be acquired from either Gonzalez, Summer Leone, or Petrine, and either Threaten Attack 1 or Threaten Speed 1. Her art is fantastic. She's got a lot of warm colors, especially in her special art. I also like how she's holding a staff like she would in a mainline game where units can hold more than one item. I give her 4 stars. She's kind of one-dimensional, but what she does extremely well. Legendary Myrrh is a blue dragon flying wind legendary with pair up and grants defense. She's got great mixed bulk, good attack, and low speed. Her weapon Godly Breath gives her special cooldown count -1 and adaptive damage. Also, if she initiates combat or is within 2 spaces of an ally, she inflicts -5 to all foes' stats in combat, gets a guaranteed follow-up attack, and decreases the damage she takes by 30%. This not only includes in-combat damage, but also area of effect damage. Her unique C skill, Darkling Guardian, grants her +6 defense and resistance bonuses, the status that prevents her foes from making a follow-up attack, and the Warp Bubble status, prevents her foes from warping into spaces within 4 spaces of her. She comes with Defense Res Unity and Dragon Wall 3 to make her even bulkier. So Myr is a great mixed bulk unit, getting a follow-up attack and follow-up denial in both phases. Though she's got good defense and resistance, she's susceptible to both bows and dragon effectiveness, though she should be able to reduce the damage by a decent amount. She's also currently the only unit with the Warp Bubble effect, as it's in her unique skill, making her a great counter against Gale Force teams that use Wings of Mercy. Not only that, it can stop other warping effects such as Guidance, which may not be from across the map, but is still considered warping. Considering the fact that many units nowadays have movement shenanigans such as Brave Edelgard and legendary female bileth who give themselves guidance movement, Myr can disrupt the movement of many units. I mean, you can try to defeat her first, but if she's tucked away or is protected by save units, it may be an impossible task. So yeah, she's a great combat unit and has a unique supporting niche, at least for the time being. For fodder, she can pass down Defense Res Unity and Dragon Wall 3 all at once, if Defense Res Bond 3 has already inherited, which 5-star Winter Jafar has. Her art is alright. I'm a little confused about the pose she's making in her normal art. It almost looks like she's going to fall over. This is the first time her artist, Azura, has provided art for the game, and they did a great job here. Looking forward to what else they may draw for Faye. I give Myr 4 stars. She finishes Myr Emblem, and her Warp Bubble can be extremely annoying to deal with. Last but not least is Legendary Xander. He is an Axe Cavalry Fire legendary with pair up and grants attack. He has great attack and speed, good defense, and low resistance. His weapon, Eben Bulwark, gives him special cooldown count -1. Also, at the start of turn, if he's within 2 spaces of 2 or more allies, he gains the null follow-up status, and a status that accelerates his special cooldown by 1 per attack. Finally, if Xander initiates combat or is within 2 spaces of an ally, he gains +5 to all stats in combat, and then after combat restores 7 HP. His unique B skill, Chivalry, gives him Canto remaining +1. It also lets him inflict -5 to attack, speed, and defense on his foe during combat if the foe has 50% or more HP. Lastly, he is able to reduce damage, both in combat and area effect damage, by a percentage equal to half of the percentage of HP his foe has. So if his foe has 100% HP, he reduces damage by 50%. If his foe has 25% HP, he reduces it by 12%. This is reminiscent of his Chivalry skill in Fates, where he excels when fighting full health enemies. He comes with Attack Speed Catch 4 and C Feud 3, which is pretty good since a lot of support units happen to be colorless. Xander is an incredibly powerful and tanky mixed-phase cavalry unit. However, at the time of his release, IS had already released a number of powerful Axe Cavs, including Groom Roy, Fallen Gustav, and Summer Dimitri. He's more similar to Fallen Gustav than the other two, though he is the only one that has damage reduction. If you happen to have the other Axe Cavs, it's not the end of the world if you miss out on Legendary Xander. However, his mixed phase capabilities makes him fun and easy to use. His fodder is great. He offers Attack Speed Catch 4 and C Feud 3. The only way to inherit both at once is if Attack Speed Catch 3 is already inherited, which New Year Liar has. His art is pretty good. It's cool to see Xander as the King of Nor. I personally think it's Penteco R's best work yet. I give him 4 stars. A fantastic mixed phase Axe Cav. And that about wraps it up. I've always found legendary heroes to be one of the greatest additions to the game. Every legendary banner sparks a bunch of hype and speculation as to who would be added next. Is there any character you're holding out for the legendary treatment? Personally, I'm hoping for a legendary Takumi, though I know the chances of that happening is pretty low, but hey, I can dream. I'm also looking forward to legendary male counterparts of Robin and Korn, as well as legendaries of both genders of Chris one day. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.